what do you think is the best objection from your experience that maybe you've heard given for why we shouldn't, believe in the Eucharist in the way that Catholics say it? And then where do you think that falls short? What do you think they're missing in that argument?
Yeah, so like I said before, I've heard the metaphorical one a lot with the I am statements. But another one that I've heard of as well is just the belief that the Last Supper, especially in particular, just merely like prefigures the crucifixion. And so Jesus is giving them, right, like this bread and wine and saying, this is my body, this is my blood, to just kind of almost like tell them about what's coming next and like foreshadow it. And so, because then he'll later die on the cross, of course. Yeah. And so that's one thing that I've heard that I think is a really interesting argument. But the thing where I feel like it falls short is that that actually can be true, that it is foreshadowing it, but it can also be a literal, like, literally his body and blood as well. So I think those two can actually go together. And that's what I like a lot about Catholic teaching in general, is that I feel as if you can look at things through all these different lenses and that they can all go together at once. And so that's something that I have heard of. Yeah,
that principle you're talking about is like that both and like sort of principle. Yes. Like that's exactly what I was thinking when you're saying that. Is it's not like that we don't think it's a prefiguration or a foreshadowing of what's about to come in a few hours, but rather it's a both and. It's like it's one. And I think this is what the church teaches, that it's one sacrifice both at the Last Supper and the cross. It's not two different events, but rather it's him at the Last Supper kind of institutionalizing, in a sense, what he's about to do on the cross into the new Passover meal. And of course, Emily, you and I were talking a little bit about this earlier, about like the Exodus and the different types and prefigurations of the Eucharist in the Old Testament. And I think the more, at least for myself, the more and more I studied and understood what was going on in the Exodus with Moses and the Passover meal and how they understood that Passover meal in later on in the history of the Israelites, the more and more my eyes kind of sort of started to become more open to understanding what Jesus was doing, right? Because Jesus was doing this Passover meal, this Last Supper meal, in the context of a people who understand themselves to be a people of the Exodus, right? They believe that every time they celebrated the Passover meal, the one that Moses first, practiced with them, they were not just remembering like, oh, that was, a good time back in the day, but they were making present, right, again, the same meal and the same sacrifice of the lamb, the same Exodus, in such a way that I remember learning that those at the Last Supper, they could say that I was brought out of Egypt. It wasn't just my ancestors, but I myself was brought out of Egypt. And so like that's what's going on when we see Jesus at the Last Supper, is he's making that sacrifice that's about to happen on the cross, just like they did with the lamb back in the Exodus, part of now that Passover meal. So now if Jesus is the Lamb of God, well, you can't just sacrifice the lamb, right? You have to consume the lamb as well for it to kind of complete that sacrificial offering. And so that's why we must eat the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. And how more perfect and scripturally accurate is it when the priest holds up what appears to be bread at Mass and wine at Mass and say, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. And then we come up and we consume him. Right. So rich, so beautiful, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. The more and more you understand like Jewish practice and customs, and the more you understand it. And I think Scott Hahn talks about that a lot in his book as well, The Lamb's Supper.
Yeah, he definitely does. Thank you for watching this clip. You can click here to watch the full episode, or here to watch another clip I think you might enjoy. With that said, before you go, if you want to support the Catechism Guy, please consider clicking that subscribe button and then the bell, and that way YouTube will have to let you know every time we release a new video.